Hope you're doing well today. Happy Tuesday. Well, as you can see, I'm not here today. And I've been missing a lot, I know, but I'm out at another conference, hopefully learning some cool things. And after today, I won't be gone for a long time. For better or for worse, you're stuck with me. For a few more months, anyways. Okay, well, happy Tuesday. If you haven't yet, first thing to do today is make sure that your Taj Mahal art interpretation is in our Google shared folder. Do that right now if you need to. While you're also rummaging through things, grab your workbook. We're going to complete some of that today. What you'll also notice, due tomorrow, some final exam review. We've got 3 weeks before final exams. Hopefully the substitute is passing out those packets. Before we dig into our topic, our last stop on the Silk Roads, I just want to mention a few things about that review packet, and you can decide what you want to really do with it. So I'm going to actually shift over to looking at our calendar that's posted on PowerSchool. So here we are on the 28th. We got 3 weeks before that final exam. So here's 2 ways that you can tackle this final exam review packet. As you can see sprinkled throughout the calendar, I've recommended certain parts to do slowly over time. That's one method you could do it. Or the other method is to take our 1 to 3 weekends before the final exam and tackle 1 unit each weekend. You could do that as well. Or you could do it all at once, but that's not so recommended. As you can see, it's a lot of work. But I'll also tell you a little bit more about the purpose of that review packet tomorrow. So homework tonight recommended that you tackle Unit 1, Topics 1 and 2 in that final exam review packet. And that's the Agricultural Revolution and the First River Valley Civilization. So the first 2 topics we learned about way back in August. All right, so we're back to our topic of today, which, based on your case study last night, you can see is our final stop in the Silk Roads, North Africa. If you want to go over the answer to that case study, they're posted for you on PowerSchool. I'll show you that too in a moment. All right, so here's the Silk Roads, our simplified map. We've done China, we've done India, and we have just wrapped up the Middle East or the Islamic Empire, and we're on furthest west, the Sahara Desert, our final stop. The other thing we have to figure out is, after the fall of the Roman Empire, why doesn't Europe plug itself into the Silk Road? So we'll actually just be spending a short amount of time on Africa and then get to Europe again at the end of the week. All right, so what did we learn from our case study last night? What did we already know about North Africa even before that case study? So one thing we know is that North Africa has always been part of our world history story. It's been part of the Roman world for 1,000 years, for example. We can go all the way back to the Roman Republic and take a look at how they expanded around the Mediterranean to North Africa, particularly conquering the city-state of Carthage in those Punic Wars. And then, as an empire, a full-fledged empire, under the Pax Romana started by Emperor Augustus, North Africa becomes an essential part of Mediterranean trade. And finally, there are all these empires that surround Rome that are what we call proxy empires. They're kind of smaller empires that emerge on the periphery of Rome because Rome has this thriving trade. So one of them, for example, is the kingdom of Aksum, which becomes a Christian kingdom that survives and goes beyond the Roman Empire. So because of the influence of Rome in the Mediterranean world, Africa has really been part of our world history story. And now we start to transition to looking at the impacts of Rome and the new influences on North Africa. So for example, when it comes to cultural diffusion and architecture, there's all this evidence in North Africa that they used to be part of the classical or the Roman world, all these Roman ruins that you see here. Now the case study that you studied, that you worked on last night, talks about some developments in North Africa that are unique, some independent kingdoms that emerge. And you had these 3 maps to start with, and the maps represent the major threads of North African history on the Silk Roads. So all the way to the left, the influence of Islamic culture. In the middle, the rise and fall of multiple successive kingdoms, especially in Northwest Africa. And then furthest to the right, you see the core reason why, is there become this new thriving trade throughout the Sahara Desert in North Africa based on two really important commodities, gold and salt. So because North Africa had lots of gold and salt, and because there was high demand for gold and salt, they become part of the Silk Road and develop strong empires there with cultural diffusion from the Middle East. In particular, the kingdom of Mali, of all the kingdoms that emerge, is a really powerful one. So another part of your case study was this Italian-made map of North Africa, and we have this great representation of the Red Sea over here, which is literally painted red. And then we've got this trade route that crosses the Sahara Desert. And in particular, we have an emphasis on these rulers or important figures. This guy in green here is a really important one, Mansa Musa, known as the richest ruler in the world during his life. And you can see him holding this nugget of gold, representing where his power comes from. So from the Italian perspective, this represents their view that North Africa is a really powerful place in the world. North Africa develops its own distinct culture by blending its African roots with the influences of the world around it, in particular the influence of the Islamic Caliphate. So, two images of mosques in North Africa, in the Kingdom of Mali or the city of Timbuktu. They have a distinctly African style, but of course, as a mosque, they indicate that there's a strong influence of Islam there. So that's a theme you should have picked up on in your case study. All right, so to put this all together before we dig deeper and look at some of the accomplishments and achievements of these African empires, here are our three themes. We've got strong influence of what we call trans-Saharan trade, the gold-salt trade. And Arab merchants were crisscrossing the Sahara in caravans, not only to trade gold and salt, but also a slave trade in particular develops in North Africa. As a result of this influx of wealth to North Africa, there is a rise of new kingdoms. So new empires emerge around these trade hubs, and there's a map in the middle of a lot of those kingdoms. And of course, the cultural diffusion with Islam, because it's the Arab merchants that were the leaders of these caravans across the Sahara. They brought with them not only the wealth of the Islamic Caliphate, but they brought with it their religion, influencing North Africa even to today, which is mostly a Muslim part of the world. Okay, so before we move on, little preview to what you're going to be working on with the rest of class. As you know, next Wednesday and Thursday, you're going to be writing your final exam essay. So here's the breakdown of what we're going to do each of those days. On Wednesday, day one, you're going to be given the day to plan your argument. So you're going to be given all the resources you need to do that. You're going to be given the prompt, a set of document evidence, a chart to help you organize that evidence, and finally an outline to help you organize the argument made with that evidence. And so at the end of class next Wednesday, your chart and outline should be complete. In other words, you should end the class knowing your thesis. And Thursday, you're going to walk into class with that thesis ready to go, with your outline ready to go, and you have the day to write your argument. To do that, you obviously can use your chart and use your outline. You're also allowed to use the rubric to keep yourself on track, making sure that you're getting everything done you need to get done in that argument. So what we've been doing lately, and what we're going to continue to do this week, is practice for this final exam essay. This, by the way, is on page 4 of your workbooks, and it is the exact rubric that I'm going to use to score those final exam essays. Like we did last week with the achievements of the Islamic empires, we're going to practice planning and outlining today. So you're going to get a new document set, and as you can see on pages 70 and 71 of your workbooks, you've got a document chart and an outline. So we're practicing, practicing, practicing. Tomorrow, we're going to move beyond practicing what we've been practicing all year and practice more writing introductions and get to how you write body paragraphs with evidence. That's the new piece that's easy to do once you learn it. We just need to learn it and practice it. Last thing before I send you off for some practice is I want to give you some feedback on your last practice. The prompt we tackled last week was, what were the most important Islamic achievements, why were Muslims able to make such great contributions, and how did the contributions impact the world? I pulled 3 thesis statements from the ones you submitted on PowerSchool. and they get successively better, as you're going to see, but I want to give you feedback on each one so you can set some goals for improving your thesis writing and, of course, practice, practice, practice. All right, so here's the first one. During the Islamic Empire, there were many accomplishments, most importantly, the development in math and science, architecture and art, as well as trade. All right, so take a moment. Think about what this thesis does well. Okay, so hopefully in your quick reflection, you notice that A, it directly answers the prompt. It uses the language of the prompt, accomplishments, Islamic Empire, and it very clearly identifies 3 accomplishments. So you should know exactly what this essay is going to be about. You should know the topic of each body paragraph, and of course, it correctly identifies the accomplishments. I can tell that the students who created this thesis understood the evidence and correctly organized it. That's all good stuff. Here's the second improved thesis. The Islamic Empire had many important achievements, but the ones that had the greatest impact on the world were their intellectual achievements, followed by expansive cultural diffusion, then the development of complex institutions. These achievements were made possible by the Middle East's connection to the Silk Road and trade networks. So as you can see, this thesis does a slightly better job at more completely answering the question. While the first thesis identified the accomplishments, the second one starts to suggest why they were able to make those accomplishments or contributions and how those contributions impacted the world. Now, if I were to give this group feedback on their thesis, the one thing I ask them to improve is the actual identification of the accomplishments, which they describe as intellectual achievements, cultural diffusion, and complex institutions. While those 3 achievements are accurate, they could be more specific. The first thesis actually does a better job at specifically naming the accomplishments. So if we were to put the strengths of these 2 thesis statements together, here's what a third might look like. The Islamic Empire was a key part of the Silk Roads after the fall of the Roman Empire. Through cultural diffusion, the Islamic Empire achieved many great things, most importantly, the development of advanced science and math, but also the flourishing of arts and extension of trade. Many Islamic ideas were spread to Europe and Asia, and many are commonly seen today as well. So this has the great qualities of both of the 2 previous thesis statements. The accomplishments are correct and specific, but it also answers all those other parts of the question. So that's a really good thesis statement. What we'll work on tomorrow is taking that thesis and making it the end of a complete introduction, which, as you can see from the rubric, is part of your introduction score. So here's what added context might look like. Background information to set the stage for the thesis. In the early 7th century, the religion of Islam was founded in Mecca, located in the Arabian Peninsula. Under the leadership of Muhammad, who was also the central prophet of the faith, Islam began to rapidly expand through both trade and conquest. After Muhammad's death, that expansion continued until the Islamic Caliphate controlled the territory spanning from the western Mediterranean all the way to the Indus River in the east. Having conquered land previously controlled by the Roman and Persian empires, older traditions blended with Islamic beliefs and culture to flourish. And that, of course, leads up to the thesis. Okay, so here's our plan. Today, step 1, you're going to use a new set of documents to complete the chart on page 70. And this is about the achievements of the African empires that emerged on the Silk Roads. 2, you're going to use your chart on page 70 to complete the outline on page 71. As you can see, just like with last week's practice, you've got to identify 3 distinct achievements of these empires. And then finally, what we'll do tomorrow is we'll take those theses, edit them, make them really good, and practice putting them in a complete introduction. And that will set us up to get into evidence and how to use evidence well. So last thing I'll show you is where to find those documents on PowerSchool. If you go to Unit 3, Silk Roads, new page, North African Empires. Here's the evidence right here in the upper right. All right, so I look forward to seeing more of your thesis statements tomorrow and going from there. Have a good day.